The real estate market in the Greater Toronto Area has been so hot for so long that in April, the provincial government even stepped in with measures aimed at cooling it off. Now, as an uneven spring market heads towards summer, some are saying the boom is finally busting. Of course, many others say it's not. Joining us now on what's going on and what's behind it, Tess Kalinowski, the Toronto Star's real estate reporter, and John Pasalis, founder of Philosophy Realty Incorporated. Thank you both for being here. We've been chatting about real estate before we started, but it's such a hot topic. Tess, on Tuesday, you reported on Toronto housing prices with this data from the Toronto Real Estate Board, which shows a drop in house prices of about 6% in May 2017 compared to April of this year. And yet, on Thursday, the Globe and Mail reported that Toronto housing prices rose by 3.6% in May compared to April. And they were using data from the TerraNet National Bank House Price Index. So how can prices be going up and down at the same time?
Well, I don't know a lot about data research, but I have looked into this a little bit. And what I understand is that there are two different indexes. So the Toronto Real Estate Board and other real estate boards use the MLS, and they have a benchmark index based on that data. But TerraNet uses a different kind of data. They actually don't register transactions, they register closings. So sales that actually went through on all sales that have homes that have sold more than once. So they register the second sale of homes. And what they tell me is that eventually actually the two sets do tend to follow one another, but the TerraNet data has a bit of a lag on it because most people buy a home, and that's what the real estate board measures. But then it takes, I don't know, 60, 90, 120 days for that sale to close. And so TerraNet's data should be coming up behind, but it's also a different data set.
But isn't this confusing? Like, John, if someone is considering buying or not buying, isn't this confusing? Why not make it simpler?
Yeah, I mean, it is confusing. I mean, I think it's challenging. I mean, and Tessa's answer is absolutely right. I mean, the reality is the numbers published by TerraNet now are actually kind of referring to sales that happened in March, for the most part. So that's why they're still up. I mean, as Tess said, I mean, there are different approaches to look at the prices. I mean, they're both correct. It is just challenging for consumers to make sense of this because one week they're reading prices are falling, the next week they're reading prices are up, and there's no slowdown. And even within the industry, a lot of people were messaging me trying to figure out what's going on and how do you make sense of this.
Well, should we be happy that prices seem to be going down?
I think it depends what side of the bargain you're on. If you're a seller, you might find it a bit confusing because a few weeks ago, people were lining up to buy your house. They were bidding crazy amounts of money. And all of a sudden, you're competing against dozens more homes in your market. So you've got to be competitive in your pricing. For buyers, I think it's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I was recently a buyer. John, in March, you wrote a report on investor demand for housing in the GTA, where you said that rising house prices are a symptom of underlying problems. What problems are these?
So what we found was there was a significant increase in the number of people who are buying single-family homes strictly to rent them out as investment properties. You know, and normally that's fine and that's normal. I mean, that's how people invest in real estate. The problem was that when we looked at the prices people were paying for homes and the rents that they were generating, they didn't make sense. They were buying $2 million homes and they were renting them for $2,800. So the rent was not high enough to cover any mortgage, the mortgage costs, the property taxes, and all the other expenses. So we believe that a lot of this type of investor demand was actually a symptom of like a speculative demand. It's people who were buying these properties strictly because they believed that house prices would keep going up 20 to 25% a year. And this is what anecdotally, I mean, what led to this reach is anecdotally we noticed this in our own brokerage. A lot of people coming in and wanting to buy homes like this and not caring about losing money every month because they just believed house prices would keep going up. And that is not, rational behavior.
Well, I mean, the government did step in April. As part of their fair housing plan, the Liberals proposed a new 15% non-resident speculation tax on the price of homes in the Greater Golden Horseshoe purchased by individuals who are not citizens or permanent residents of Canada or by foreign corporations. Has the new tax, which actually came in effect on April 21st, has it contributed to the cooling off in the GTA that we're seeing in housing?
I think psychologically it has, but I haven't found anybody who has any firm data on how many foreign buyers are actually involved in the Toronto market. And I certainly haven't found anybody who suggests that it's a greater level of foreign ownership here than in Vancouver, for example. So I think it's had a big psychological impact, but I'm not hearing that it's had much impact in the sectors you would expect foreign buyers to be buying up, which is...
What sectors?
Those would be pre-construction condos and luxury homes, because there's this pervasive feeling that foreign buyers buy high-end property or investment condos. And I'm told pre-construction condos are still selling out. Some big projects have launched since the tax was announced, and they're
Do you think this was the wrong
well.
approach by the government? John?
I don't think it was. I mean, I don't think it did anything. I mean, it's in theory important to have done that, but the provincial government put in so many exemptions that probably no one fits the description. So if you have a student that's going to university, they're basically saying you can come here and speculate all you want, and all of your profits are tax-free because your child's living there and it's a principal residence now. And they're exempt. I mean, they don't have to pay the non-resident speculation tax, and all of their capital gains are tax-free. And I think that's problematic in a market like ours that is appreciating at this rate. So they probably should have gone further and made it a little bit more difficult, because the problem when you...
In what ways, though?
Well, not have all of these exemptions, right? Because the problem is when you open up your doors and basically allow your market for single-family homes to be a market that people can just speculate in, who's it on the backs of? It's on the backs of, middle-class homeowners and home buyers who can't afford homes now, or who have to spend an extra $200,000 or $300,000 on a home, or a year ago they could afford a home for $650,000 or $700,000 in Aurora Newmarket. Well, now homes there are $900,000, and they have to move to East Gwillimbury or Guelph. So I think they should have had way more measures to kind of curb this type of speculation.
So, Tess, what can be done to rein in this sort of property speculation?
I'm going to be honest, I don't really know. I think you could restrict mortgage holders more. The lending rules on second properties could perhaps be tighter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the requirements on when you're, they changed the requirements on buying second properties a while ago, but one example would be increase the down payment requirements when you're buying a second or a third or a fourth property. And there are a lot of, there's countries around the world that have different measures. They put in additional taxes if you're flipping homes. So if you're buying and selling within a short period of time, and they do these things not as just like an overall rule that that's what you want to do in your market, but they introduce these measures in periods where it looks like the market is frothy and speculative. It's not done kind of universally all the time. It's just these new measures that are introduced for a short period of time to try to cool the market. And I think the provincial government sort of missed an opportunity. I mean, a lot of these measures should have been introduced early in 2016, not in 2017.
And we've been hearing a lot about people from Toronto moving to Hamilton, people calling it the Brooklyn of Ontario or Canada. But there's also been reports that some people have been pushed out to Montreal, which to me is shocking. So how big a ripple has the GTA's hot housing market created in surrounding communities?
I think it's huge. I mean, both Terranet and the real estate board data suggests that some of the hotter markets are the ones out toward Guelph. And I've talked to people in Hamilton who are concerned that the buying fever from Toronto is actually pushing Hamiltonians further down the Niagara Peninsula. So I think it is significant. I mean, the markets around London are apparently hot, even as far as Windsor. So I think it's had a big impact.
And Tess, in your article on Tuesday, you wrote that research for the Ontario Real Estate Association showed 37% of Ontarians strongly believe housing affordability belongs on the upcoming provincial election agenda, with 30% saying they would more likely to vote for a party that takes on the issue. Are there measures in the Ontario Fair Housing Plan that could satisfy these voters?
I think probably rent control is something that could satisfy a lot of voters. I imagine that's pretty popular. But there's a whole issue around renting here. People believe that if we had more rental, our housing would be more affordable. Not just because people could have the option of staying in rental apartments longer, but it would cool things down considerably. So there is that, although now there's the competing opinion that people won't build rental apartments because they can't make their money back on them.
Do you think that's the way to go, John? Have more rentals?
Well, we definitely need more rentals, and I think that the decision to limit sort of the increase on new construction is problematic because it's not going to encourage more construction. I mean, just as developers were announcing more purpose-built rentals, the province introduced this measure, and it's probably going to curb it. I mean, I believe the province said they might be open to sort of changing that around sort of newly built ones. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I don't think this is law yet, so they're going to potentially open it up to newly built purpose-built rentals to give them a little bit more flexibility.
And I've also read articles that people should just give up the idea of owning a detached home. Is that fair?
I think everybody has to make compromises in life, and I think with the region that we're building, there will be compromises. I don't think people who move to Manhattan expect to live in a detached home. And I think with the Ontario Growth Plan and this
But are we Manhattan? Like, they're on an island.
I know that, but there are people, but we're in an island essentially with the growth plan and the green belt around the city. The government is telling builders, this is the land for building homes now. And there's strong data suggesting there's lots of it, but beyond that, you cannot go. So we're going to be squashed into certainly a designated area, and there will be some compromises that people have to get. The question is, if you're willing to buy a stacked townhome or a townhouse with a little patch of grass, and you have to travel to one of the 905 communities around Toronto to live in that, is that still the dream?
Right. And John, at the beginning of May, Tim Hudak, who is now the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, spoke to Steve Paikin about some of the things his organization asked the government to put into their housing plan. Let's take a look.
Speeding up the approvals process. Like, it takes way too long to get a new housing subdivision approved. It could be up to 10 years in some municipalities. So we got that. More of what's called the missing middle homes, and these are more affordable, so good starter homes for people. Maybe in Toronto, stacked townhomes in the GTA in Toronto, 7 to 9 stories. It's also really good for empty nesters. And when they move in there, stay close to the grandkids, the traditional family home opens up for somebody else. So there was progress there. Would the realtors like to see more? Yeah, a lot more. But that was a big step forward, we thought, from where we were a year ago.
John, why aren't more starter homes being built?
Why aren't more starter homes? I mean, I think it's just a function of how our markets change. I mean, we're building more condominiums than we are starter homes. And the condominiums are the new starter homes, right? I mean, to kind of Tess's point earlier, people just have to sort of change what their expectation is of their first home. So we are building a lot of houses. And in fact, I mean, the construction industry and the new construction industry is building pretty much at peak capacity. So I mean, while the supply measures that the province has put in place, I mean, are great, it's not like the builders can go out and build 60,000 units even if they wanted to. I mean, that's been their argument for 10 years. There's just not enough labor. There are not enough electricians and drywallers to build them. So they're already at peak capacity.
And John, are infrastructure projects such as schools and transit keeping up with the development? No,
and I think that's one of the problems. I mean, transit in particular is a huge problem because if if we had an interconnected transit system, which of course Metrolinx is working on now, I mean a little bit behind, but it would make living in some of these further out sort of municipalities a little bit more livable if you're able to get to work downtown in an hour rather than 2 hours. So, and that in and of it, like that alone takes heat off of your housing market because you don't all have to build now in the downtown core. You can start building in sort of some of these further out areas and they become places that people want to live in, partly for affordability and because they're connected to downtown.
I have a friend who lives in Pennsylvania and she commutes to New York City. So I guess their infrastructure is really well developed. Another thing that comes up a lot is schools. A lot of the new developments will actually, say you find the neighborhood that you want to live in, and then you buy in that neighborhood, and if it's a new build, if it's a stacked townhouse or a condominium, they usually have these signs that say you might not be living in this catchment area. You might actually, your child might have to be bussed out to a different place. Doesn't that create another set of problems, Tess?
It sure does. I remember covering the school system when Milton was booming a few years back, and places like Brampton were just building like crazy. And you would have kids going to 2 and 3 different schools before they hit grade 8, because they would build one, open it, and then change it to, say, an elementary school, and the kids would be bused off to another middle school. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
And what role does the broker play in all of this?
I mean, in the context of schools, it's difficult because a lot of people buy, because they want to be in a particular catchment area, in a particular school district. So it's definitely difficult when people are buying new construction properties, hoping they're going to be in a certain school district. All of a sudden, they sign the papers and a sign go up saying, "Oh, by the way, you might not be in that school district." And this is common in areas that have very good quality schools, right? And it's a way to get into these school districts. I mean, the theory is in an affordable way, rather than spending $2 million, for a house that's on the subway line, you buy a $500,000 condo or a $600,000 condo.
Which is still a lot of money. That's $500,000, right? Yeah. I mean, the Star did an article recently comparing what you can get in Toronto as opposed to what celebrities around the world live in, and it was astonishing. Tess, do you anticipate that this cooling trend is going to last for a long time?
Oh, well, I don't believe in making...
Or if it's called a cooling trend?
Well, I think people think it's cooling.
Yeah.
I think the best example, the best comparator we have is probably Vancouver. Yeah. And Vancouver, when they introduced a similar tax, and they introduced some vacant home measures to discourage streets of empty homes, the market definitely did cool. I mean, people stopped buying for about 6 or 8 months. But last
going
month,
up again.
It's bouncing back. And a lot of people believe, because there's no real reason for things to have cooled here, we still have good employment, we are still a very desirable place to live. A lot of people assume when the psychological impact of what the government just did wears off, we're going to bounce back again.
Well, any advice on how sellers and buyers should react to all this, John?
I mean, not to overreact, I'd say. I think that's the most important thing, because I mean, certainly it can be alarming. I mean, sales are down quite a bit, right? But a lot of this is psychological. And it's very possible that come September, I don't think we're going to be in a market in September where prices are going up 20% a year again. But this very likely will probably be in a little bit more of a balanced market again, because the market is quite slow right now. And I think some sellers are getting anxious, some buyers are getting anxious. But, for some buyers, there's opportunity out there. And for some sellers, just going to take their homes off the market and wait till the fall.
And Tess, what do you think?
I think John's probably right. Yeah. I don't think that 33%, which is I think what sales were up in March, is a sustainable number. I mean, if we had that on any other commodity we use in our lives, eggs, gas, we would not accept that. You would have people in the streets rioting. I just don't think people are ready to accept that, and I don't think there's any reason for it. I think the up and the down is largely a state of mind, and probably people will regain their balance along with the market.
But it's hard for as somebody who's trying to get into the market, you kind of have a feeling of powerlessness. Yeah. So what do you do? Because the media's saying something, the numbers say something, and then, it's a huge number to... And if the bubble pops, you don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, what we do, we like to, educate people. Because when you look at these statistics, number one, they're for the entire GTA. And what we're finding is that the numbers are actually very different across the entire city. So in downtown neighborhoods, the market's actually still relatively competitive. There's like 1 or 1.5 months of supply, meaning if no other homes got listed, everything that's on the market would sell within a month or two. And you look at some 905 areas, and they have 7 or 8 or 9 months of homes sitting on the market. So, as a consumer, as a home buyer, well, that's information I want to know, because if I'm buying a home now, I'm probably going to want to buy in the neighborhood that's a little bit more competitive still, because the homes that have a lot of inventory usually are more likely to see a decline in prices.
But it's interesting you said that, because we've been looking for a place for a long time, and we didn't have access to that information. Yeah. So do you think that regular people should just have access to what's on MLS instead of having to go through an agent?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and they should have access to the MLS. I mean, we're waiting to hear back for the appeal from the Competition Bureau on this issue. But it's actually a little bit more than MLS. It's trying to figure out how do you make sense of all of these numbers and these trends and these statistics, and how do you use it to help you make a more informed decision. And we find that that's always the hardest part, you know, because it's a lot of math and numbers and trends and stats and all of these things. Well, how do you communicate it simply to people? Say, okay, I don't think you should be buying here. If you want to buy here, maybe we wait it out because prices are not going up there anytime soon when there's 8 or 9 months of inventory. So certainly people should have more of this data in their hands.
And then maybe take out some of the emotion.
Absolutely. And I think that's important, whether it's in, you know, I grew up in a real estate family, right? And they're not emotional. It's like prices go up, that's fine. Prices go down, who cares? I mean, there's peaks and valleys all the time. And I think that's the best way to make a balanced decision. The people who make the worst decisions are the ones who got caught up in the peak, feeling anxious like they're never gonna afford a home. You know, and the ones that are getting caught up now are just feeling overly anxious and sitting back when, you know what, maybe it's okay time to buy now. If you're buying for the long term and you're gonna be there 10 years, you're going to be fine. I mean, whether prices fall a little bit now or 6 years from now, you're going to be fine.
John and Tess, I could talk to you for another hour because this is one of my favorite topics. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.